whether you've realized it or not, Google is dead.
Because they just think, oh, it's AI slop, right? And that's an unfortunate term, but it's the reality when there's just so much AI content out there that gets sort of pushed out.
Should you go into development or should you go into something else because it's just going to be replaced in 4 years? All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Make an Impact podcast. I'm your host, Makoto Kern, and I'm joined again by my fellow co-hosts, Brynley and Joe.
Hey, everyone.
Good to be back.
Yeah, definitely. So today we have an exciting topic, and we're going to start it off by our search engine's dead by 2030. The internet as we know it has only 5 years left. I think, Brynley, you want to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. Good bit of a controversial topic, but I think one that's got a lot of meat to it. I think we all got thoughts on it as well. And I was kind of thinking, well, it's AI and the extinction of the internet search, because we sort of think about, well, what if we had to say in a few years, we're really going to feel like dinosaurs by, telling our grandkids, we used to go scraping around on this thing called the internet. We used to use these search engines and you'd scratch around and try and find some information that we needed. And there was this old interface that you typed in things and you got these 10 search results. You picked from them and you didn't know what you're going to get until you went in there. And it's just a joke when you actually think that there's been such a radical shift recently in how we access information. And that really casts a light on how we have been for the past probably 2 decades, kind of navigating around to sort of figure out what this thing called the internet was. There's a whole profession, I think, probably going to try and juggle the order of that was set out. Like you think of the SEO profession, which we'll go into a bit as well, like a whole profession trying to get these little sites to where they need to be and try and one up on the other one. So today I think we've all got some points, but I'm going to be dropping a few absolute mind shifts. Maybe not to all of the listeners. Maybe some of our listeners would be like, well, that's quite a fundamental shift in my understanding. But these are really everything that's come about since the advent of AI. So the first one is...
Sorry, Bryn, before you jump in, could you just tell me the 3 points that you have? Because I don't want to jump ahead and start talking about something that you may have a point to come across.
Well, that's a spoiler alert, Joe.
Okay.
Keep it a surprise.
But we'll look at search engines, and then I guess the search engine is the first one. The other one, let's see whether we go into. I can always bring it up if we do. And then the third one is kind of around SEO.
Yeah, I think the big questions we'll answer are websites will they even matter in 5 years or so? And what happens to human curiosity when answers are immediately available? Are we witnessing a birth of a post-search internet? I think these are some questions that we'll answer with the topics today.
Well, that's absolutely it. And I mean, the first one that I wanted to talk about is whether you've realized it or not, Google is dead. So, if you think of search interfaces like Google, Bing, Yahoo, I mean, think about them. They're old, they're clunky, they're really outdated. Or to be brutally honest, they're legacy interfaces. So if you're still using them for your primary function of locating information, then it's really time to look at breaking that habit, because that's an age-old habit.
And just to add in a bit of my own thoughts there too, I think they've kind of shot themselves in the foot a bit too, especially Google, obviously the main one. Just in the last few years, it's kind of gone downhill. Forget about ChatGPT, forget about AI in general. Just, if you try and do a Google search now, like half the results are adverts. You're not too sure like how they even got there. So much of it is manipulated with SEO. It just feels like a trash experience just using Google. Never mind like a competitor that's come across now that's so much better. So I think they really were in a really poor position. Yeah, they're trying to, I guess, get a foot back up by integrating Gemini directly into search. So when you search, like Gemini tries to get the results, they're trying to make Google another search tool. That's what they're trying to do. But it's still just, unfortunately, I feel like their first attempt at it was so poor. Gemini, in the beginning at least, that first initial model left such a poor impression. First impressions matter. And Gemini really wasn't good in the beginning. So many of those search results that Gemini would come back with were just wrong entirely or just completely incorrect and manipulated. And it's kind of just like they had a really poor user experience. And then when they tried to catch up, their first offering was just so poor that I think everyone's just completely abandoned them now, unsurprisingly.
Interesting point too, and a good terminology is that zero-click information, where right now, according to the data, it looks like Google's AI, the overview that you first see, is appearing in nearly 20% of searches, with some industries seeing over 33%. So that's a fundamental shift in how information is delivered, because we know the first page was always the golden top 10 to get onto, and then the second page it drops off dramatically. So you're pretty much screwed if you're not on that first page. So this is a interesting refinement to now are you only seeing the very first information from Google AI.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it does bring into question, there are almost two sides of it. There's information discovery, which, if you're using any of the interfaces of the large language model sort of powered assistants, that information search is going to be far more powerful than anything. And then there's almost validating, what you're looking for is, going and checking sources. And that's where you still need to go to this legacy interface and find what you need. I mean, that's even sped up by things like OpenAI with the references that it leaves. You can go and click those and actually view the site. But you do wonder if you had to abstract the information from the websites, what is the future of this going to become? And it kind of builds into the second point, which I'm going to mention, because I think there's a lot more to discuss about both of these points. But it's that the web is becoming a database, not a destination. And I think, Joe, we've spoken about this quite a lot, is looking ahead. It's really about how can you surface the information on your business or your service, whether it's a service, a product. How are you surfacing that information to large language models? And, as we look even further to what you're saying, Makoto, about, what is the future of actual websites? And, is it that everything actually becomes integrated into one universal chat interface? Because imagine if we had to say, all right, if we're looking at more a database approach, could we say that we just have some sort of like an API endpoint that becomes our site that shows any latest content, that maybe talks a bit about our brand voice and how it's should be communicated, some imagery, some interactive applications, and these all get brought into the chat stream. So if you're crossing over to an experience, that experience happens in the actual stream. It almost seems archaic to go, we're going to shift away now to a completely different, independently designed site that is, going to very much rely on how much, I guess, that company or even that person invested in developing that. That's one point. But then you start looking at the small business, and small business may not have the SEO knowledge, and they may have a good product or a service or a message. And now, without this sort of manipulation of search results, they could be just as relevant as anything else, because you could really target it based on just honing in on that information itself, which is quite exciting. And if there are guidelines there for, right, here's a boilerplate, almost like you get the boilerplate sites now. You have a boilerplate set of information and voice and imagery that even ones that the AI puts in there.
Do you wonder though? So thinking of that, so you're saying basically we'll get to a point where you go to chatgpt.com and that basically becomes your portal to everything, right? You don't go to websites anymore. You'll go to that site instead, search what you want, and it'll grab the context out of all these APIs and quotes which are hosting the content instead. I can totally see that. I guess the one thing that I can see that might stop that completely just becoming the norm is, I guess, user novelty and experience. Like going to chatgpt.com, even if they make it nicer, more interesting, it's always going to be like, people get bored, right? They want to go to somewhere else, see something new, a new user experience, a new design. Like people are always looking for something that's fresh and interesting. And I think that's the one counter to that is I still think there'll be value and want and desire to go to a different site to get that new experience. It's not just about pure information. It's also about being entertained, just sort of having new experiences, I guess. And you'll never get that if everything is just going to to one sort of site. At least
I
with
would
Google, you would click
I would
into those sites.
disagree. I mean, who knows where it's going? But
Hmm.
what I would think is that if you think about the fact that we have to navigate around at the moment to these unique sort of independent sites, and they're controlled by whoever owns them and their content, it's not an ideal experience to sort of start jumping between the different,
Hmm.
there may be different requirements in terms of support. One may be, pushing a high-res video, and maybe, certain people can't see that. What I would think
Hmm.
is, if the internet starts becoming more like a database, you're pushing a standard. And through that standard, you define the certain interactions you could have. So imagine you're talking to ChatGPT or to Claude or any of these different large language models that you choose. There'll be a whole lot of different interfaces, just like the different search engines. But
Hmm.
the amazing part is, by having some sort of standard protocol for sharing information, the experience can change. So I could say, look, I'm handing you over to, let's say you're going to like an Amazon, and that experience changes completely. So you have a slightly different, way that the bot's talking, way that visuals are brought up, and even
Hmm.
sort of interactions that, whether it's, interactive elements, but the whole interface could be changed in a standardized way to give you that different experience. Just like as if you stepped into a store, you're talking to a different salesperson or a different tech expert, or
Hmm.
you're going to feel that change of experience that is going to be more an extension of the brand coming through. And then you're
Hmm.
sort of drifting between. So you can say, okay, well, I'm chatting to Amazon now, same interface. I'm going to order these things, or maybe change the quantity of that. Can you get it to me quicker? Great. Now I want to go book some, I don't know, theater tickets or whatever.
And I
And that's a
guess
whole
the
different
nice thing about that
experience.
too is you can be very personalized with that experience. I can be the sort of person that's like, I like my experiences to be minimalist, clean. I don't want extra fluff. Just give me like the pure, simple interface. And so it gets to know you. And every time you ask, give me information about, Amazon or something to buy on Amazon or something to buy on Bidderbuy, right? It's going to still get that data, but always presented in the way that I like it presented. I don't have to go to Amazon and like navigate through the extremely clunky sort of catalog when you're trying to actually search for things. Like now I can have it in the way I want it, but I can have it in the same way if it's another site that I'm actually like trying to access and sort of get that information from. Or if I'm the sort of person who really likes, lots of visuals, and if I'm looking for products, I want to see adverts for those products as I'm scrolling and just like get a really rich user experience, then that could be tailored for me. So the AIs can sort of tailor it for each person, which would be pretty amazing.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so essentially what you're saying, it becomes a giant chatbot, the internet, and you go from hunting to basically harvesting. Search is going to fragment into specialized AI tools. So like you're saying, Brynley, like shopping, research, or entertainment. And with the search, you're going from like a keyword based conversational system to more of like you're understanding what the actual context and intent are for your search. So there definitely seems to be that shift into going from is your website, you're just going to throw as much information up there so then it could be pulled in by an AI chatbot, or are you still developing this pretty looking marketing type of website where you have to worry about the user experience?
Yeah, that's it. And I
Yeah.
think it could be a more standardized approach where, if you have a platform, you're not having to develop, like now you have to, let's say you're doing a mobile first, or you're building websites and they have to be on a phone and a tablet, on a, maybe a VR headset, or, there are lots of different things that you need to factor in. It's almost be good if it could, in some ways, be a more standard approach that can work across all of those, and it really just harnesses the technology. So if it's on mobile, it will limit maybe some of the visuals that come across. You've got certain sort of platform specific assets you can feed it, but to be able to do that and have the standard sort of really really clean experience, I guess, and also potentially a safer experience. Like if you think, we want to say, well, my kids or my kid can use this, and I'm happy that as long as they stay on the platform, everything's vetted and they're not going to get anything. Maybe there's a different section that they can go off the rails, and you can start getting more radical opinions or things like that, but there's a more
Mm.
set of approved sites that you can sort of move through, and that the experience is going to be safe, secure. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I also
Just
wonder,
thought.
just sort of thinking forward though, a lot of this will depend on just society's impression of AI going forward, because I'm already seeing it with things like art. Art's become a very contentious topic with AI, like kind of the art community in general, and understandably, not just, art from a hobbyist point of view, but from a, business point of view, generating assets, generating content. Anything that's getting AI generated now is getting quite a stigma to it. And if something gets posted, like the first comments are, "Is this AI generated?" And even if it looks good or not, people, if they see it as AI generated, they immediately want to disregard it because they just think, "Oh, it's AI slop," right? And that's an unfortunate term, but it's the reality when there's just so much AI content out there that gets sort of pushed out. Taking a step back from that and just looking at what's happening with art in general, and with, as movies and video is starting to become more popular now with sort of those AI models, I do wonder if it's going to get to a point where AI is so stigmatized that sort of, your homegrown, organic, user-made, human-made websites are going to become more kind of, people are going to prefer those, even if there's a faster, better AI alternative, just because I feel like this is a more human-centric sort of thing that I'm witnessing. I'm going to, and this is someone built this site, and this is like, a human experience. Just because of the complete flood of AI content that's going out there, people just kind of want to disregard it entirely. And so again, with website design, is it going to get to a point where, sure, AI could generate you 100 websites that look amazing and work amazingly, and probably most people couldn't tell a difference, but there will be a stigma to it anyway. When they go to a site, people are going to demand, you have to put in your site if this was an AI generated site or not, because people will be like, "Oh, well, we don't want to go to those sites. We want to go to like real human sites." I'm seeing that. I'm not too sure that's going to become the reality. Again, economy talks. And if it's just, if the experience is just better and smoother, people always go with that sort of experience by default. But interested to see if that's going to come
I
about.
like your term AI slop, Joe.
Yeah.
We might have to
There's
make
so
a
much.
T-shirt from that one. But it's
Yeah.
funny, it's interesting too,
Yeah.
because I actually talked to my son. He's about to turn 17, so he's a younger generation, and as soon as they see anything that's AI generated, they immediately disregard it as garbage. Doesn't matter if it's art or video or whatever; they just see it as this is AI generated. And I see that with comments too online. If you see a comment or whatever, a posting, they're, "Oh, this AI generated." They won't get past the first two sentences if you recognize, "Oh, this is ChatGPT." But it is interesting because there is a retro feeling where my son is actually looking at, they love the old record players, the tape, like videotape recorders. They love that retro feel because there's buttons, there's something physical that you click and press. And that becomes like the cool thing to have. I mean, I think the old flip phones now are pretty much in style, and same with the Sony Walkmans. So they love having that kind of like thing versus having, because I'm like, why do you want a camera that actually, you have to take a picture? Your phone does that. And they're like, no, this is really cool. This is what we like playing with this. I'm like, it doesn't make sense. So
you're saying we should invest in Kodak again? Quick.
pretty much. I think so.
But I think there's probably a line there that we can draw between content creation and AI tools for increased efficiency and experience. And I think that's where AI strong. I don't think people want AI necessarily to create art or music or even design. Even what I'm talking about, this platform, that could still be all human generated content. So instead of designing a site, you're just working in that framework. But it just makes a lot of the things that we want to be easy really a lot easier. And if you can think of someone, let's even look at something like teaching kids about history. Imagine that your site has a lot of good human written content, but you can package it in a way of someone from the 1800s delivering a talk about American history or anything like that, and it feels more authentic and it changes the experience. And I think it's things like that. And then also, if you can do your grocery shopping and just say, "I want this brand of this," without having to go and actually manually search and click it.
Yeah, I
It's just
totally
going to be
agree.
so much better.
Day-to-day tasks, right? Task-orientated stuff like shopping, like just buying stuff, just like tasks you don't really, you don't want to really be emotionally connected to, like art or like content. You just want to get the job done. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's open doors for AI because no one really cares.
But then
in
you
most
think
ways.
even things like art, there's no reason that you couldn't use you couldn't, be representing and showing real art on the sort of feeds to be able to discuss it and build people's appreciation of it. It should be, anything that is AI, keep AI where it's really useful, still appreciate and foster humans actually generating all the cultural things that we want. But, I wouldn't mind looking at, if I could go through again and look at any of the famous art galleries and be able to actually see an artwork pulled up on my screen and be able to talk about it, maybe understand the paint techniques and that's really for learning. That's invaluable.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
or even critiquing a movie that is, I just think that there's got to be boundaries of like, right, we
Yep.
don't necessarily want AI just rehashing things that are done already. And I think people will find that balance and realize that, okay, well, it's not necessarily what people want. So, but it still has a place.
I think if we touched upon the people who create this, create videos or create websites or create things to drive traffic to them, they got to adapt to being basically they're being cited versus being visited. So
Yeah.
your traditional revenue generating models of ads and things like that are going to have to change. And like if you're an authoritative person on that content, I think those are probably obviously surface more through the AI, which hopefully it raises that kind of bar for creators who are developing the content. But then again, that's like the whole shift where you may not get the actual experts, you just get somebody who's very good at talking about it versus somebody who actually knows about it. Just like the top 10 in SEO, you may not be the best or the most popular, it's just that you know how to optimize your website. So you automatically become, the most visited site. So there's definitely going to be shifts in how and who like get surfaced.
Yeah. It was interesting. An article I was reading recently was saying that, Google is obviously in trouble because search is going to change, but they're saying that they were calling it their side hustle, which is YouTube, because it's always been sort of kept already branded Google, anything like that, is actually going to be their saving grace because people will want that video content and those can be pulled into streams, these sort of conversation streams really easily and say, oh, I'm looking for this. I mean, already you see OpenAI, kind of plugging YouTube videos if something's relevant. And, that's how it should be. Things should just come in and out of your stream based on your conversation.
Yeah. And I guess from a technical perspective, it's not like Google's actually gone away. It's not like search engines have gone away. We just don't go to them ourselves. The AIs are still using them, like, ChatGPT or whatever will still search the web for you. So I think just from a technical perspective, that act of, indexing content that's on the web and accessing it and all that infrastructure isn't going anywhere. Google will still have all their data centers. But again, as you said, Bryn, we have to think of it more as like a database of information now rather than individual places that people visit. The whole infrastructure is not going anywhere for sure. It's just sort of changing how it's accessed now. Now it's AI access instead of human accessed for the most part.
And you could think if it does sort of change formats, if there's a different endpoint that you'd have your site, maybe the internet could be, that whole sort of search function could also be fundamentally changed. If instead they're just these endpoints surfacing certain information,
Yeah, I mean, do you think, does AI even need that? I mean, all you really have to do is just throw content at it. It can put it into the format that it needs, even if it's HTML. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be some new special format. Like the AIs just all work it out for you. You just have to provide the content. That's it. Pictures, text, in any format, text files, PDFs, whatever. You just throw it into some folder and it'll just, that's it. That's all you need to do. And it'll take it from there. And when people access it, it'll all look amazing and well structured in their generated AI content. But from your perspective, you're just throwing in content.
Yeah. I think you touched on the one point about personalization, but there's probably a personalization kind of paradox where most people do expect that, but then it creates these like filter bubbles. So you're limiting the discovery. So when you do go down those rabbit holes, or if you do find things because you're not finding it at first, you're kind of limited now to this constraints of what the AI filters. So are you limiting that kind of curiosity, or you're limiting that just because the user is now satisfied with whatever answer they're given, but that's what most people are satisfied with. So you never get to discover new things or new views on something because that's what most people are presented by when it comes to that personalization.
It could be. I wonder though if there's not a human bias to that. You may be someone that is either looking for information. And the amount of time that I've maybe opened Facebook and I've spent 10, 15 minutes scrolling, doom scrolling, and just realized I could be actually applying myself and learning a lot more, but I'm just going to keep going. It's something satisfying about it. And you kind of think, could it be a similar thing where if you're interested in kind of asking more questions about dogs or cats or something completely irrelevant to the deeper, more meaningful things in life, you can do them there. But if you're motivated to do it, you'll step out of that sort of comfort zone.
Yeah, that's a funny thing because I don't know if you've played with Grok recently. With Grok, they have different types of personalities. They have everything from like sexy to something else. I mean, it's pretty funny, the different personalities, because I want to engage just to see how they respond to something. It's almost having a conversation with your smart ass friend, your friend that's super, intelligent, or the one that just, is rough around the edges and they'll tell you like it is. There's definitely a sense of that doom scrolling or dopamine where I want to play with the responses and see what I get. So, that's one way to handle it where, even if you're introverted, you still want to text and still interact with something that is artificial, but does have a personality, which is interesting.
But also the way that, I don't know whether you saw, complete tangent, the latest Boston Dynamics robot.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Now you just think,
put AI in that.
I know. Now you just think like there's a very, very kind of, we're close to those being merged together. We can just say, hey, buddy, just order me this and go pick up this for me. And it's
definitely.
Yeah, so
I think it's like technically possible right now. There just isn't like the infrastructure for it, but I don't see why it couldn't be.
I'm just thinking when you instead of a human robbing you or mugging you, you send a couple of these after. You're like, how can I fight that thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The applications of because we've been talking about virtually right now, like how AI is going to change the virtual world, but physical world, again, as you say, with robots like that, to like every aspect of the world, like construction, home security, dangerous jobs people don't want to do with those robots. Like that's just going to take over all of that. Yeah, it's going to be crazy where that goes. That's the whole next stage of
it is
AI impact, I think we're going to see.
And then looking at those personas, I mean, I'm sure Elon must have thought, okay, well, let's develop these personas so they can go into, the bots he's developing. And, you can pick those, the more comedic, the serious, it's just, it's a great feature for what would you like your robot to be?
Yeah.
And it'd be quite funny if they had that in sort of factories. Well, just a mix, just have the Joker and the the serious philosophical guy, and the quite amusing. The next point I had was SEO is the new fax machine. So the more that people start using large language models and break away from the search, the less and less relevant SEO is going to be, because at the moment there's nothing that I'm aware of that's tying website ranking to the fact there's large language models have scraped everything. So if it's
just to add in there, because I just want to ask you this question because you're talking about it. When I ask ChatGPT something like, how do I use concept X, and I ask it to use a search, and it is using search, I can see it searching through websites and returns results. I do wonder how it's getting those rankings. Like, what search engine is it using? I presume it's using Bing because they have such a close partnership with Microsoft. So I presume the backend is Bing. It's still going out in the web, but still searching for results. There must be some ranking that's determining, okay, when I ask this question and it's getting the context from these 3 sites, how did it choose that? I think there must still be some sort of SEO going. Is it just going by Bing's top results? Is it really just doing the same thing?
It could be, but then it depends. Like I would think if you look at the large language model, we think it scraped everything that's accessible. Therefore, it's made its own sort of links there. So if you're asking a question, and it's falling back on that, it's going to pull something that's
Mm.
could be thousands deep in search results, but
Yeah.
it's pulling that out. Now you ask it to search on that, it's going to be specifically searching on that specific item, which may bring back more relevant searches for that. So definitely search is
Mm.
tied in, but I wonder, if it's not surfacing things that wouldn't have been there originally and generating these sort of new search queries based on those. So it'll be interesting to see, but
Mm.
you
I
know,
it goes into, if you want to check out our last podcast about the AI arms race, it kind of touches upon some of that, where who are the new kind of gatekeepers,
mhm,
and
Mm.
like you
Yeah.
said, how deep that information goes. What are they using to curate that information? Can we trust that information? Is it a hallucination? Is it an actual
Mm.
citation? That's where we have to understand that gap, where it's coming from, who's the gatekeeper, and whoever is that gatekeeper now, what is their intent? Thank goodness there are multiple competitors now in this space, and you're
For
seeing
now.
differences in, oh yeah, for now, you
Mm.
see everything from the pricing
Mm.
differences to, how the information is brought up, and there's known biases. It was actually on X where they showed which AIs have been taught to be, whether you're political or not, to be more woke, less woke, to have like DEI, to whatever controversial topic there is, to be more biased
Mm.
towards those things and to present
mhm,
it as, oh,
Yeah.
this is okay, versus something that maybe is more objective, that isn't that way. So it's
Definitely.
interesting to see how that is going to play out.
mhm. Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean,
exactly.
people, when they ask questions, generally want to get like, the answer that they want to hear back. And
Hmm.
if they ask one AI model that question, they get an answer that they want back. They ask another one, and it does give them the answer back that they want to hear, just sort of like confirming their bias.
Hmm.
They'll just go with that. And you're going to have, without question, I think, political leaning models, just because that's user behavior and users will gravitate to something that they feel mirrors their own beliefs more than something else. Just human
Mhm.
Hmm.
nature, I guess. So
But
yeah,
what
without
about
question, I can see it going that way.
when it changes from SEO to really become AIO, AI optimization? What is that? I remember we had the black hat and white hat techniques,
Hmm.
for SEO, where, what are the black hat techniques going to be for AIO? Because if you're releasing a lot of false information, is that just being
Mm,
scraped up and taken into the mix? And, can
yeah.
you start making your content more prominent by sort of covering more points of view, or how are you going to get it to really group your content in a multitude of different sort of subject nodes in the model to try and get more hits that way?
So no more same color font as the background as you keyword load the
Yeah,
website.
remember that.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
You'll just embed it into an image, a happy image.
yes.
You'll embed all this, copy in there.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah. Man.
I
Yeah.
remember those
It is
days.
one
Interesting.
it is one interesting angle there. Like, can you trick AI into sort of indexing content that it wasn't expecting? Because, there's still a human deciding which content gets included in these models. And if that human makes a mistake or sees a site that looks completely harmless and they go, oh, this
Is
looks like
there
it has
though?
good content. What is there? What?
Is there that? I didn't even think there was that form of gatekeeping, just from the sheer volume of content that it's got to digest
It's
and
got to.
ingest.
There's still someone who decides what data is trained by the model. It's still a human team that decides that, right? It's not
Wouldn't
just
that be a
going out on the internet and,
huge? Wouldn't that be a huge style? I mean, if you think of the amount that it's
yeah.
ingested, would take probably teams years and years and years to kind of work through. I stand to be corrected. That was my understanding, but
What's the alternative? There's no real other way it can be done. There still has to be a human deciding what data. I mean, I'm sure they got huge servers that they just sort of add in all this data to petabytes and then just sort of train the model on that. But still is,
mm,
traditionally at least, maybe in the future, obviously AIs will go and decide what they want to grab
mm,
from the internet. But at least these initial models are definitely all human collated.
okay. Mm,
And I'm sure they have to be, in a way, at least like a list of everything it was trained on. There's a whole copyright thing going on right now too with
mm.
what's OpenAI CEO's name again?
someone
Jeez, I know
Altman,
why.
not
Yeah, Sam
Sam
Altman.
Altman, yeah,
Sam
jeez, I know
Altman.
why.
Yeah.
That's yeah. So he's having a huge thing at the moment, legally trying to say like copyright material needs to be completely open to AI models to get trained on. There should be no sort of legislation around that, because if that's not the case, then they lose. Like America, if that's the legislation, America will lose their AI arms race, because competitors out there in other countries will just churn it all up and use anything that's out there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just going back to my point, right now, there's definitely a human collated sort of database of that. But in the future, if it's AI is just going out and grabbing it all, there has to be some way, like if it came back with the wrong answer, like a really bad answer, like how to build a bomb, how did that information get into this AI model? Like where did it come from? And there has to be some sort of audit trail. So that's why I think at the moment, they definitely have that. If AIs are just going out in the future and just deciding on their own what's relevant, then yeah, they'll be interesting to try and work out. But whole other mess to
It's
sort through.
fascinating though. There's such radical changes happening. And it's interesting to think 5 years, and there probably will be, that's probably the time that we'll see search engines completely changing. And it's going to be interesting to be a part of that as well.
Yeah. I don't even know if it's going to be 5 years.
I know. I think
Yeah.
some interesting kind of future views. You discussed that kind of your 3 topics you wanted to bring up, right, Brynley?
I have, yeah.
Okay, cool. I think some things to think about for a future is how is AI and humans developing a complementary role in information processing? Like just to something to think about, like how is that going to evolve? Obviously we have AI agents. Do you have one always running in the background for you? Is that something that's the only way that it could be complementary? Is there anything else that you could think of?
Well, you mean besides Neuralink?
What's that?
Because Neuralink,
Jeez.
that's just the step that's going to be
Yeah,
ideal.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Being able to just tap into that, and just an extension of your own intelligence is
We all become
gonna be,
Morpheus and Neo.
yeah. And it's actually,
Trinity.
it's probably not that far off. When I always think back to that, and it was like, wow, that's really great. But now, what is the difference? I remember that one scene where I think they're putting the specs on the military helicopter, like how to fly it.
Oh yeah.
Probably not that. If you had a Neuralink or something, you could probably even have the muscle memory kind of baked into a download to be able to, to pilot something like that. It's
Can't be too hard. You're just monitoring pulses from your spine to your your joints
That's
and your
easy.
muscles. So that's easy stuff.
Yeah, that's the easy part. But I think one thing that'll definitely, I guess, just outside of asking for knowledge and requesting knowledge, is just having something that has a huge memory that's just constantly running, listening to you the whole day, everything that you say, everything that you type in your computer, every human interaction that you have, everything that you're looking at. If you think of like, Google Glass and things like that, that'll sort of monitoring what you're looking at. It's just basically recording your every single day, every single interaction that you have. You'll be able to literally ask like 3 years ago on this day, what was I doing that day? And instantly you get the answer. And just sort of having that augmented memory, just sort of sitting there outside of just asking it to do things for you, just having all that knowledge of your whole life just permanently available is going to be a very different sort of a paradigm too, just because it's just so easy to look back and ask it what's going on, and it knows everything about you, and you can literally build a model of you, I guess, if you had it running your whole life. I mean, it knows you so well. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
And you sort of say, give me an honest, how am I doing in this thing called life? You're about 45%.
Real talk.
You're way below. Oh.
Yeah. But I mean, if you think about it, if it's monitoring your whole life as you go through life, I mean, I'm sure it can spot you going down certain, paths you shouldn't go down. It can see you going down a mental hole that you shouldn't be in. It can start, counseling you and saying, hi, look, it's a day that you spent extra 3 hours just browsing TikTok normally than you do longer. Is everything okay? How are you feeling? And then it can start to try and get you out of bad habits. Or if it's monitoring your food intake, you've been eating a lot of ice cream recently, like what's going on there? And it can, I don't know, it can really sort of help people just, learning wise too. Hey, look, I know you've spent the whole day playing computer games today, but you got to study for your exams. Let's sit down and go through it together. And it's sort of like trying to help you through life a bit more than you just us thinking of it as some entity that we're just using for knowledge and information that can actually like guide you through life and pick up on patterns just because it's looked at models of people who haven't worked out in life and have ended
Mm,
up on the street, and now it knows, okay, what were the decisions to get to that point? How can I make sure
mm,
that my human doesn't make sort of similar bad mistakes?
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that'll be
crazy
interesting,
sort of
especially when it
concept to
says
go
like
through.
you keep complaining about the robot army outside your door. Don't worry about them.
Yeah,
It's no
everything is
problem.
fine.
So
Yeah.
you really don't keep asking me. They're
Yeah.
there for
Yeah,
your own benefit.
yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think this next point, it's an interesting where, what skills will become more valuable as AI handles these routine information tasks, and how does this reshape kind of education, work, and just human development overall? I think this is interesting because kids are at that cusp. It's almost the same as when the dot-com boom happened. That's when, I was kind of already into my engineering profession at that time, but growing up into that, and just as my kids are growing up with AI versus, their kids will have it just there, just like
Mm,
mobile devices and the internet's just there for them, and that's what they're used to. They're now at the cusp of like, I'm trying to get my kids to say, hey, just leverage the AI, use it all the time
mm,
to help you accelerate what you need to learn. But to understand should they study in school, that's a hard thing to
Mm,
figure out. Like, should you
yeah,
go into development or should you go into something else, because it's just going to
yeah,
be replaced in
it's a
4
hard.
years. Yeah.
Mm,
mm,
definitely. My immediate thoughts on that are, and this is kind of going out quite far further into the future though, but I do think as AI takes over like the mundane tasks that people do right now, until, we can get AI into robotics, anything that has to, have a human physical interaction, right? So forget about anything that just requires, like coding or driving a vehicle, or anything that's mundane that can just be automated. But anything that can be done in the physical world that needs a human actual approach, like looking after children, looking after, old people, or, building buildings right now, at least, again, that might change in the future. But anything that requires like a physical human presence to actually get it done, I mean, that's at least for now pretty safe. But yeah, as the robotics take off and it integrates with that, that could change too, in which case it's going to fall back. Okay, so you can't use your brain to create anything interesting, because at least from a pure technical task focused perspective, you can't use your body anymore to do stuff, because there's robots out there that do it better and faster and never need sleep. So I think it's going to fall back to creative side of things,
Hmm.
because that's one thing AI can't do, is be creative. It can look at everything else that's been done before, at least for now, right? Until, AGI comes along. But at least for now, as we look at the landscape, it can't come up with new topics. It can't think of new things or create new art or do anything like novel that's human. I think any industry that sort of requires creativity in that way, that would be my best sort of approach to go with, because again, that just can't be really replicated properly by AI. It can make you think it can, but when you dig deeper and you sort of look into it, you
mm.
can, obviously it's generated that from existing human content. It hasn't actually created
Yeah,
it, even
exactly.
though it may be not that obvious.
So we could say, kids, you got 10 years until AGI comes along. Good luck.
Yeah.
Pick
Yeah.
wisely. I
Mm,
don't know. It's also, I wonder
mm,
to look at the psychological difference with it. I'd just be very curious. Like, I would imagine we're using it, very much to, to prove concepts we're thinking about, to provide us with more information. But if you haven't
mm,
developed maybe those more analytical thinking skills or even conceptual thinking skills, do you rely on it more, to try and make decisions for you like that? We've come from a time where you had nothing to reference and you had to make decisions by yourself. You couldn't lean on anything apart from maybe getting advice from someone.
mm,
And that helps maybe structure the way you think, where you make decisions. But for a younger generation where they have access to this all the time,
yeah.
I'm curious how their decision making has changed. Do they have less confidence in their own decisions without running it by an AI, let's say? Or should I take that
Mm,
course at university? Or I don't know. Let me ask.
yeah.
Like, what does the AI think about it?
It's almost like if you could try to match it up with, when we were using abacuses back in the day. I wasn't, that was before my time, but when we jumped to calculators and then from calculators to spreadsheets, like
Mm,
that transition, or from libraries to Google search.
mm,
What was the mindset at that time when you're thinking, oh my God, we're going to get replaced? Accountants are going to be replaced because of the spreadsheets, which they didn't. Now they might be, but
Yeah, I mean,
before
I'm
they
sure
weren't.
still impacted that whole industry, because you'd have
Yeah.
jobs of people whose job it was like build out those spreadsheets manually with a calculator. And while accountants
Mm-hmm.
weren't replaced entirely, I'm sure a lot of, that work went away.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just left with the more sort of nuanced, high level accountants,
I
required to look at
mean,
the overall sort of figures.
yeah, I guess you could, because you're
Yeah.
able to gather large data sets and do it faster. Maybe that's the
Mm.
onset of, obviously like the quant trading with stocks and everything. They can do it so fast, rapidly. And now it's really just all these kind of bots that are helping you trade, and you're just developing the algorithms and detecting patterns.
Mm.
That's what came into fruition from that. And maybe that's how something is going to, with AI, it's going to evolve some other industries into a much faster, bigger data sets. And maybe, like you said, maybe just a mundane task goes away, and now it's something far more complex that we didn't even think of, because it's outside the box, whether it's space exploration, finding other asteroids or
Mm.
planets that have minerals or something like that. That's very hard to do, and it takes so much computation power. But now with AI, we can all kind
Yeah,
of, like, it's
exactly.
almost like panning for gold or something like that.
Mm.
I'm not sure.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, it's again, like throughout human history, this has just constantly come up where there's an established way of doing something, and then some new technology comes along that totally upheaves that entire sort of industry. And as humans, we always bounce back and find sort of new ways of doing things. Previously a farm would need 1,000 workers on it, and now you can have 10 machines and 10 workers.
Hmm.
I mean, we're still here. We're still, okay, not the whole
Hmm.
world is doing okay, but we're not worse shape than we were. Quality of life generally is improving, even though all these things have happened and changed, and people have lost their jobs over the centuries because of it all. And human quality of life is getting better. We're all smarter and eating better and healthier. And so, if you look at that trajectory, you know, although it can seem scary now, long term, I still think it'll work out. Humans do find a way of just sort of finding other things to do and focusing on that instead and innovating.
It may be through things like universal income as well. Like
Mm,
there may be
yeah,
a completely different economic landscape that countries
yeah.
need to follow to actually keep it balanced.
Definitely. The problem is that right now we're moving very slowly. AI is moving so fast, but humanity is moving slowly. Like a lot of the time, like, when I talked about the sort of, changes in industry and changes the way things have happened. There's a slow process, right? So farmers, farm work is getting replaced by machines. That wasn't done in 2 or 3 years. That was done, over 2 or 3 centuries, probably over time.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
very slow adjustment that, people could find other things to do. Whereas with AI, it's happening so fast. And I think our legislation is so far behind our way of thinking about life. Like you just say, universal income. I mean, that's going to have to happen, but we're so far behind that. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, I was just thinking about it, the education system now too. Our education system is so antiquated. We're still making kids memorize lists and memorize,
Hmm.
information. It's like
Mm.
that should have been out like 20 years ago with
Yeah.
computers and storage. Everyone's carrying around phones with the world's knowledge at their fingertips. Why make people memorize like just pages and pages of how to do things? It's pointless.
Mm.
So just from looking at our overall society, we're moved slow. Like we're still teaching kids now that we taught them like 50 years ago, almost in many ways. Same
Mm.
fundamental sort of way of teaching. And it's just like we're so slow in that regard, never mind legislation to sort of keep up with how AI is going to change things. So there might be a bit of a dip, I think, when, things get taken over by AI and by robotics, and we're just a bit slow to catch up with it. And then, there'll be drama and people have to like, oh, we have got to make these big decisions. And I think, big legislation will get pushed through then and society will change. But I think it's going to happen pretty quick, and there's going to be a bit of turmoil probably before everyone bounces
Mm.
back after that. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
I think it's a good cause for us to become more spacefaring civilization at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll
Absolutely.
have to expand,
Mm.
otherwise we'll be all over each other, and there'll be AI actual wars fighting with all these robots
Yeah.
from Boston Dynamic and iRobot movie. so
Exactly.
Yeah.
so cool. I think that's a good place to end for this podcast. A lot
Yeah,
of great
good
topics we
conversation.
discussed, for sure.
Yeah.
I think maybe one question to leave the audience is, what's the one thing you'd miss about today's internet if it were to drastically change?
Mm.
Be a good thing, good thought thing
Yeah.
to
Good
tell
question.
yourself. Yeah.
Mm.
But yeah, thanks again for tuning in. Like and subscribe to our channel, and talk to you next time. Thanks everybody.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.